International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women and ends on the 10th of December. That is today, which is Human Rights Day. Did you know that? It aims to raise awareness, advocate for change, and inspire action to prevent violence against women and girls worldwide. We hope that these campaigns actually do make a difference. We hope that it knocks some sort of consciousness into people that are basically advocating the GBV. Now, let's look at some of the stats, right? Global stats from World Health Organization, the prevalence of violence. Now, according to World Health Organization, 1 in 3 women globally, which is approximately 736 million women, have experienced physical and or sexual violence at least once in their lifetime. And then there's the intimate partner violence. So 20% or 27% of women aged between 15 to 49 years have experienced physical or sexual violence by an intimate partner. Then there's the impact of violence. Violence against women is a major public health problem and a violation of human rights, often leading to physical injuries, mental health issues, and that is like your depression, PTSD, and so forth, and also long-term health consequence. And then there's the underreporting. So yes, people know about this. Perhaps you're listening in and you know that I face that, but I do not go and report it. So less than 40% of women who experience violence seek help, with many not reporting incidents due to stigma. There's then the fear or lack of access to support services. And then, sometimes you're also faced with that hopelessness of what difference is it going to make? What difference is going to make? Okay, and then there's also the global initiatives. So World Health Organization works with the UN Women, UNICEF, and other organizations to implement preventative strategies and improve survivor support systems. We're chatting about this topic today with Sister Zainub Tayob. She is joining us live on Facebook right now. She is a practicing beauty therapist. I think too much of sugar for me today, this morning. She has a degree in science with honors in clinical psychology. Alhamdulillah, she has her own business for 26 years, and she also does motivational speaking, and she has been involved in charity work for many years. Assalamu alaikum, Sister Zainub. Welcome to Urban Women this morning.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and jazakallah for the opportunity to be on Urban Women. It's great to be back.
Wa alaikum salam, an absolute pleasure to have you on. Now, let's talk about GBV. It's very sad that we have to actually keep doing this every year, and somehow we hope that the stats come down, but it seems like we're not really seeing much of an improvement. What would you say, Sister Zainab? What are the root causes of gender-based violence in different communities, and how can they be addressed effectively?
I hope we can do justice to this topic in such a short space of time. Really, it's your question on its own is so broad spectrum. It's like, as you said, in your community. So are we dealing with our own Muslim community? Are we dealing with an interfaith? So in every community, there is something that causes it. But I think these days, for me, from what I'm seeing when I speak to people generally, it's 2 major things. The one thing is the drug and alcohol abuse. And believe it or not, even being Muslim and dealing mostly with Muslim people around us, we see an increase in that. Whether it's because of how life has changed and it's much more social and everything else, but that has been the greatest issue at this point in time. And then obviously we have the problem of acceptance, that there's a problem. Shame for the victim, embarrassment for the victim. Nobody wants to come forward. So those are all root causes, because when you don't come forward, when you don't speak up, when you're not supported, it just stays behind closed doors and nobody can actually help because people don't know about what is actually going on. So if you speak about a root cause, I would put it down to those sort of things. But I think greater than even having the drug and alcohol abuse that causes the problem, it's the matter of nobody speaks up simply because of embarrassment and being accepted and being shamed. And, our community and society lives so much by double standards. As you say, we have this every year and the stats are not changing. So we've got to look at ourselves and ask ourselves, why isn't it changing? Why are we holding back? Because it's not about, oh, you know what, let's just go and report this and let's go and report that. It's how are we interacting with each other when somebody comes to you and says, you know what, this is what's happening in my home.
Mm.
So the root cause is difficult to pinpoint, because that again is broad spectrum. Because we can say it's even because of the drug abuse, or what you call shame and all of that, but it's also how everybody's brought up. Parenting.
Yep. Correct.
Parenting is crucial. How did your child get to that point? Whether it's male or female, abuse is abuse. So, how did your child get to the point of abusing somebody else? That
Mm-hmm.
is something we really got to look at, and that is something that is completely ignored, because people like to blame outside the home. They don't like to take responsibility for how they have contributed to that specific problem, because when there is that problem, nobody sits down and thinks that, okay, my child was involved in this, this is my child from my home. How did he become or she become a drug abuser, an alcoholic, an abuser, or any form of that? The
Mm-hmm.
question actually, the answer to all of that starts from within you. If you do not look within that home, that community, you cannot solve the problem. So
Yep.
I would
I
say
like that.
starting from there.
I like that one. You know, it actually
That's it.
reminds me of a story that, like the analogy that's often used when we're trying to resolve a problem. It was about a man, you probably heard the story, that lost his keys inside his house, but he goes outside because there's a light switch there and there's some light. So the neighbor comes and says, "What's going on? Let me help you. What are you looking for?" And he says, "My keys." And he says, "Okay, fine. Where did you lose your keys?" "Inside the house." "So why?" Then the neighbor says,
Why?
"Why are we looking here?" Right? So everything we want to
Definitely.
put externally, we want to blame others. We want somebody to take the responsibility. Well said, Sister Zainab. We want to avoid responsibility as much as possible. And I think something very imperative that I think victims also face, which prevents them from speaking out, is also the fear of who the perpetrator is. So
Yes.
basically, the attachment of families, especially in our society, or how would that family then see me or treat me, or they need to be seen in a certain light. If I'm going to go and speak out, what are the repercussions? And all of these kind of waswasas go through, and we never know what can also be stopping people from speaking out. And of course, then if you don't do that, you're just the enabler of the perpetrator. So we're talking about communities, we're talking about culture. What would you say? How do culture, societal and economical factors also influence the prevalence of violence against women and girls?
Well, you touched on it. It's culture. It's how we brought up. You know, it's unfortunate that we are Muslim and our deen allows for so much of equality, which we
Yeah.
choose to put behind and bring forward culture. I think the
Yeah.
more we learn about our deen, the more we look into what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made. And I mean, if we see it, it is a mercy unto mankind. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has not said it's a mercy unto men or female alone. It is a mercy unto mankind, everybody across the board. We don't look at that. We look
Mm.
at who, as you said, how are we going to be judged in society? Who is the perpetrator? What is going to happen if we bring it forward? And you know what? Yes, it's difficult when you are stuck in that position, especially if you are not financially independent. It becomes an
Yes.
even bigger problem to get out. The thing is, that is where we as families pull together. If a
Mm.
mother or father knows their child is being abused, you don't have to go out in public. You have to deal with it between in your home. Create those
Mm.
boundaries. Sit as a family. Don't go out. If you feel that it's going to affect the larger community, the larger spectrum of families, it is protecting your child, your wife, or your husband, or your son. Find a way. Do not turn away from whoever comes to you. There is always a solution. It's just that we choose to look at one problem. What is society going to say? Or if it is
100%.
within the family, we are going to be the cause of the breakup in our family. So are you allowing somebody to live the rest of their lives in that situation? Because everybody else needs to be happy and we need to have this picture. So yes, culture is a huge problem. It's an
Mm.
absolutely huge problem, because even when people do come out, it's blame. nobody wants to stop. And it's the strangest thing is that, like, oh, could they not have sorted this out privately? Why did they have to bring it to the front? Now look at what they've done. No,
Mm-hmm.
you know, take it, deal with it, but do not leave people alone. When it comes to the economic factors, lots of families are dependent on other families within our society. But there is
Mm-hmm.
always a way. If you choose to look into your situation, there is always a solution to the problem. It might not be exactly what you want for that moment, but the
Yes.
moment you start working on it, it expands and you move forward. Allah always says, cannot change the way of a nation if they don't change themselves. So we also have to be realistic in how we manage a situation. And obviously, each situation is individual. It's going to be according to that specific family, to that specific person. But it does not mean you keep quiet. And this is where we have the problem where families ask people, keep quiet. Don't break the family. Don't embarrass the person. You know what? It will change. It's not going to change if you don't
Yeah.
change. So we need to set aside culture. We need to
Mm.
look at how we look at our deen. And if you don't look at it in any other way, look at yourself as a Muslim and what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has taught us. We are allowed to stand up for ourselves and don't
Absolutely.
use that as a thing that, shame, we're trying to save everybody because the person is in need. And we've got to look at that individual at that point in time.
Absolutely. It's so important that our deen teaches us about zulm and that it's something that is not condoned in our deen. But as you
Exactly.
highlighted, and it's what we see very often, that the cultural conditioning actually, it's sad to say, but it supersedes our deen so much so that we're living in such times that what is halal is made haram, because if people don't accept
Yes.
this, then how dare, we go ahead and do this? How dare can we accept this? Because so, in the eyes of society, what will people say? How will I be judged? But if we can just, inshallah, Allah Azza wa Jal bless us all with the ability to step out of that limited thinking and think of, ask the question, what would Allah Azza wa Jal think about me? Can we be so bold to extend that question to that higher level? And if we could, then we will all be guided, inshallah, to do things the right way. But inshallah, I hope that the consciousness is changing from cultural to deen, inshallah, because as we're learning more about our deen, then we are finding the certain cultural conditionings, but we cherry pick, isn't it, Sister Zainab? We cherry pick what chooses us. We cherry pick what suits our
Definitely.
family. We cherry pick what will pick
Certainly.
on other people as well, even though we don't implement it. It's the
Mhm.
reality that we're facing. Let's head over now to educational systems. How can educational institutions also play a role in preventing gender-based violence and also promoting gender equality? Are we not talking about
Uh,
LGBTQ? Yeah, on the lighter side.
Oh, that's a whole different topic for another day, I guess. When
Um,
we look at it now, when you say institutions, are we talking about educational institutions as our schools and things like that? Or are we talking about our ulama bodies? Because I look at them as working hand in hand. You can't have one without the other.
mhm.
And then you have to add on what you've learned at school, you will put in at home, and what you learn at home is what the school should carry out. So and that's where we find the challenges, that you might learn something at school and you come home and you share it with your parent and they're like, no, this is not the way we are brought up, this is who we are and this is how we manage things. And then it goes down, so the poor child is now confused.
Yep.
So when we speak about institutions, we've got to be very clear. We need a community that agrees on what the institutions are teaching. And then we look at our ulama body. And I must say, alhamdulillah, over the years, they've really come on board, especially with mental health issues and things like that. But
Yeah.
then you've got to look at the quality of it.
Hmm.
I mean, yes, there's a place to go to, but how are the people being treated? I mean, is there certain steps that you are following? Who are the people that are treating people that are coming in? What are they? What's their background? I mean, are they properly qualified to treat trauma? Those are things that we now need to start looking at. So, alhamdulillah, we have an entry point. So when we speak about institutions, I think it's very important to look at the quality of what these institutions are actually offering. And then we need to look at how is it implemented in society. Is there a paradigm shift in society that we are now offering this here, but then you go back home and then it's taboo? So if there's no balance between institutions and society, no matter what the institutions actually implement, you come back home, and where does that fall through? The thing about institutions is that I feel they're trying so hard, really, but this has spiraled into such a big problem within our communities and our society that you got to now bring back and say, okay, let's look at this aspect and let's look at that aspect and let's address it, in smaller portions instead of doing a whole blanket message. Because once there's a blanket message, it's even more confusing to a society that hasn't been dealing with this all the time. So
well,
that's where I think we need to actually look at.
It comes back to your initial notes of the first question. You came back and you highlighted a very important aspect, is that if this is happening in my home, then what do I need to change? And often that's something we really don't want to face. We really don't want to ask because we're so afraid that it's going to be perhaps something that I'm doing or that I've done or that our home environment has actually supported and nurtured. Because let's just face it, it's this vicious cycle that just continues. Our children see what's happening in the home environment, becomes norm. It goes out. That is why, when it comes to marriage, it's such an important thing, because talaq and divorce and this whole breakdown affects so many lives and so many people. So it goes so much deeper. So yes, as you're coming back, the children may learn certain things, but if the home environment is in conflict to that, then what happens? So we do definitely need communities that support the greater good, inshallah. What would you say, Sister Zainab, speaking as communities, speaking as individuals, what actions can we actually take to challenge the norms that perpetuate violence and advocate for a safer community, inshallah, and society?
Coming back to it, look within ourselves. Look at what we are accepting of and look at what we are rejecting, and challenging those norms in a way that is positive. When we look at our society, as soon as somebody decides to speak up, it's like, no, you know what, she should have done it like that, and they did this in this way, that's why they got it done in that way. Nobody stops and thinks, okay, you know what, they're trying, this is their way, how do we help? Let's not be critical, let's be supportive. Nobody's supportive. So when you're challenging norms, it's all about being supportive in this situation. And yes, there's a right and there's a wrong. And there's, we come from a community that loves to add on everything. And when you actually into that, the most important thing is, I always feel, bring yourself in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And let's say, is he going to be pleased with my actions at this point in time? If we don't hold ourselves to that, then it's very hard moving forward. So challenging the norms will be there. Taking it out will be there. Really, it's like putting it out there openly in society. This is what has happened with me. But then seeing it through is something else, because you've got to really be strong to challenge those norms. And
Very
you've got
strong.
to be, I think you've got to be, let's put it this way in layman's terms, you've got to have your ducks in order, because people are cruel, society is cruel. So when you choose to speak out, you've got to have good support. And I feel families need to come together on this. Within our family systems, recently a friend of mine shared something with me that happened to her when we were in grade 5. And I had no response, because we've grown up together. We were in school together. I knew her. We saw each other every day. Our families are interconnected. And she said, this is what had happened to me then.
And you had no
idea. I
was
like, oh my word. Oh my gosh. Where do you start from? And now if you look at it, I think what we need to do is, yes, there's a problem. Okay, we don't want to talk to everybody about it, but let's get help. Let's get help Let's work through it. We don't have to go out and embarrass people and say, you did this, you did this, you did this. But challenging the norms in this day and age, I would say, is supporting a person.
Amar being
Irrespective of what somebody else says, oh, there's something wrong with her, that's why she's seeing the psychologist, or she had to go onto medication and see a psychiatrist or whatever. You know what? Let it be. It's your journey. It is
absolutely.
your
Sister
journey
Zainab,
with your
we're
child.
gonna subhanallah, due to time, we can go on talking. Inshallah, we'll have you
Yes,
back
we
on
can.
again. But again, the big question is, can we be advocates of Amar bil Ma'ruf wa Nahi anil Munkar? Can we promote goodness and try and stop all the evil that we're seeing, especially in this time of fitna? And the big question, the golden question that you've just highlighted is, how can we help? In hindsight, yes, we can all judge and we can all, say should have, could have, if only they did that. But how do you know their circumstances? How do you know where they're coming from? The big question everybody needs to take away is, how can we help and how can we please Allah Azza wa Jal? May Allah Azza wa Jal guide us all. Thank you so much, Sister Zainab, for your enlightenment on this topic. Inshallah, we wish to connect with you again. But until then, have yourself a lovely day further. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Jazakallah for the time on this show.
Barakallah, it was absolute pleasure. We were chatting with Sister Zainub Tayob, who is talking to us about GBV. Yes, 16 days of activism. Remember that there's so many challenging things that we're facing. Hope you took a lot of golden nuggets from there. May Allah Azza wa Jal bless us all with the ability to implement them. Ameen. Quick break and then time for me to wrap up. 11:57 is the time.